Welcome back. Now, Nigeria's anti-graft agency, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, is turning up the heat in its battle against unexplained wealth. And this time, it wants the law on its side. Chairman of the EFCC, Ola Olukoyede, says Nigeria cannot win the anti-corruption war without the legal backing to hold public officers accountable for assets far beyond their legitimate earnings. Speaking at the National Conference on Public Accounts and Fiscal Governance organized by the Public Accounts Committee of the Senate and House of Representatives in Abuja, Olukoyede described fiscal rascality and mismanagement of public resources as a core driver of Nigeria's economic woes and security challenges. He said issues like banditry, kidnapping, and terrorism are often linked to systemic corruption, noting that diverted public funds intended for development frequently fuel these criminal activities. He recounted how investigations into public officers' acts of malfeasance were often stalled because the law actually still requires a, quote, predicate offense, that's a specific crime such as theft or fraud, before assets could be seized or charges filed. Well, the EFCC chairman now wants that changed. Joining me on the program to discuss this further now is Lanre Suraj, who is the chairman, Header Resource Center. He joins us from Maryland in the United States of America. Mr. Suraj, thank you very much for coming on the program. This unexplained wealth bill, what do you make of it?
Thank you, DEJI, for having me. And also, I think it is actually what you're reading from, what you just read from the EFCC chairman is just a symptom of what you can consider as a frustration on the part of the law enforcement agencies. Also with the, particularly with the courts and the judicial system and its administration of criminal justice. Very sadly and unfortunately, is what you've seen with some of the cases that are associated with politically exposed persons, high-profile corruption cases, particularly also with many of the governors. And that is to the unfortunate aspect to which many of them have perfected the act of trying not to leave any trail. So contracts are just merely awarded to certain contractors and friends. And just like you heard the FCT minister, for instance, also said during an recent interview in his accusation against the former Minister of Transportation, where 60% of the contract of the state was awarded to a particular contractor, and in return, the particular contractor gifted the, what is it called, about the Rolls-Royce car to the minister as the former governor of Rivers State. And what you've also seen with the former governor of Kogi State, in the case that is currently also in court, that EFCC revealed with the former governor paying hundreds of thousands of dollars as school fees for the children, even the children unborn, to a particular school. After some of the allocation of the states were converted to US dollars through, cronies and family members, and you borrow the change. So if you have some of this asset frozen, and there was a recent case also with the ICPC where a particular contractor also got contract from the TED fund, and you're talking about the tune of about R1 billion. And before the implementation and execution of the contract, even 50%, without implementing 50% of the contract, the particular contractor already converted those funds released to dollars, bought, a special vehicle of the Mercedes-Benz hatchback, 2 of those, without delivering on the primary contract for the purpose of which the fund was released. So the ICPC succeeded in freezing those assets and also the bank account. Unfortunately, this was challenged in the court, and the court has said, oh, go and return the money and the vehicles back to the contractor. These are the unfortunate situations where for you to successfully recover those obvious illicit assets, the court is going to be asking you, okay, yes, the person does not have any other means of proving is acquisition of those assets, but you also don't have any offense that can be directly linked to it. So we were under this kind of situation. The onus should have shifted on the defendant to show that you have acquired those assets through a legitimate purpose and means. The court is pushing back, and the EFCC's Act, Section 7 of that, actually empowers the EFCC to to freeze or confiscate suspected assets that are beyond the legitimate earnings of the owners. But sadly, this is what you're going to face when you get to court, with the court asking you that even though they can see the evidence, but you still need to prove the element of offenses and crime for successful forfeiture.
But isn't this? I'm just wondering, when you say unexplained wealth now, I'm just wondering, isn't it omnibus now? And do you think this is a kind of bill that might sail through in the National Assembly?
It is extremely going to be difficult. I mean, this is not with the crop of politicians that we have in our National Assembly, because they're actually also going to be affected. So when you're looking at the system and you're looking at the kind of characters that are involved in the whole advocacy for change, then you're faced with the reality that it would be such an Herculean task, which is the same challenge that we have with the whistleblower protection law that allows for people to be protected when they spill the bean, particularly also on financial crimes, because many of the politicians are the ones that are actually in the waiting to be victims of the operations of that law. And for several years, it's been there. Even at the time it got passed with and was at the point of accent under Buhari's regime, some of the advisors of Buhari succeeded in convincing him otherwise. But if you look at the 773 houses that that was discovered by EFCC and was traced, and the EFCC was a bit kind of strategic by not naming, even
though it eventually came out anyway,
as the owner. But at the point in time, even though Emefiele also denied ownership or association with the properties, I'm sure some of the lawyers must have gone to him to convince him and possibly also see how the process and the system can be manipulated to forfeit after final forfeiture, to reverse the forfeiture of those assets by coming out after an initial denial to then claim ownership and also claiming that it wasn't sufficiently informed about the forfeiture process and even the interim forfeiture from the court. So these are the challenges, and when it is not properly, usually properly managed by the judiciary, the proceeds of crimes are returned to the suspects of the criminal to continue enjoying, the benefit of those criminal activities.
So the way this, I'm just wondering, because it depends on what the EFCC now envisages. I mean, does it mean with this bill, what the EFCC would then be required to do? That's if the bill, eventually becomes law. The EFCC can just pick on anybody of interest and then ask the person to come and explain the source of their wealth, to defend that, probably take them to court. So the onus of proof will now be on the defendant to prove why, how they got their wealth and all of that. Is that how, the EFCC envisages that when this bill becomes law now, that's how it will work?
Yeah, actually, because it is not only just in Nigeria. It was actually passed earlier on also in the United Kingdom. And that was actually out of the concern for the proliferation of criminal funds into the purchase of assets in the United Kingdom. And at that point, the UK had to put a threshold of the £50,000 that the system can actually invite you to come and explain the source of your wealth for any asset that is gone beyond £50,000, £50,000 within the UK. So at that point, if you're picked on out of the suspicion or out of the interest, or even out of the fact that you are a public office holder, if the whole level of your acquisition. And this would also be such an interesting case, like the one that we currently have with the Minister of FCT, who was gallivanting. I was so reckless to even openly say that his children of 21 and 25 years have the right to own landed property in Abuja. Yes, nobody is going to be disputing that, but that is not going to be under you as the minister. Of FCT, number one. Number two, those lands can actually be, for now, seized by the EFCC for those children to come and prove to the court and also convince the EFCC that they have had means of working to acquire landed property worth of billions of naira. Even, I think it's even billions of dollars from the calculation. That is number one. Number two, for even the FCT minister himself, Wiki, who since the last 30 years or thereabout has been in public office, from local government chairman to chief of staff to minister to governor of Rivers, and eventually now minister, how from that public office you can prove to the court that you've acquired or accumulated allowances and salaries to the extent that you cannot, you can now afford all those assets, including your children that were not even of working age at this point in time. So this is the kind of thing that the unexplained wealth will be targeting, and that will reduce so much the primitive accumulation and propensity for accumulation of illicit wealth, because people will be under obligation to not only convince the court but also the public on the sources of their wealth. This is the so sad aspect that I saw also the video recently of the governor of Ogun State, who had gone to have his, I think it's the 65th birthday somewhere on an island, and that how, in that state with the level of poverty, where you even have ritual mothers of innocent Nigerians prevailing in the country, in that state, without any serious action on the part of the government to curb that or assist the people and lift them out of poverty, and the obscene display of wealth by people who are managing, the public asset, and with also failure of these governors, particularly the governors, to increase the lot of the people, despite the increasing federal allocation after the removal of fuel subsidy. This is with an important bill and eventually law that will help the country in actually having the judicious use of its public resources for the benefit of the people.
And he keeps talking about public office holders. Shouldn't this apply to even the private sector as well? To private individuals, or other than those holding public offices?
It applies to everybody. That's why I said the unexplained wealth of the UK was talking about the 50,000 threshold, and that is actually not really in any way excluding the private individuals. But let me also tell you for a fact that majority of the private persons in Nigeria that are involved in criminal activities is as a consequence of the compromise or failure of a public officer to actually do the right thing. So the bankers who you see them with all these crazy profits declared, salary paid, private jet ownership, is because they are succeeding in assisting many of the public office holders in stealing public funds. So they get their percentage from it. It is because there's a failure of also the system to properly regulate the bank, because these guys are able to also grease their palms. So if you're also looking at the estate agents or even the accountants that are also manipulating the books, it is because the professional association and sometimes also the council responsible for the professional misconduct and discipline of officers are failing in their duties to do their work. So the moment you can get right the public institution and officers to operate within the provisions of the law and enforce the law to the letter, it will reduce seriously, drastically, what you also have with individuals. Unfortunately, you look at what you have, anytime you have many of these public office holders in court, there's always also the culpability of the bureau de change. So I've always said and maintained, and this was also confirmed by some high-level intelligence and investigation work, particularly by the EFCC at some point, that the bureau de change system in Nigeria contributes immensely to the devaluation of the naira. The moment a federal allocation is released at the end of every month, majority of these governors run to the bureau de change because they don't want to leave traces within the financial system of the country to convert some of those federal allocations to dollars and move them to government houses and start also spending, paying contractors, or even moving them abroad to buy properties out of the country. So if we either strongly and strictly enforce and regulate the bureau de change, or even suspend the operations of bureau de change, except for the fact that some Nigerians will be out of job for this period. But if we can provide alternative employment for people, suspend the operations of the bureau de change in Nigeria for a minimum of 1 year, I can assure you the value of the naira would go to as low as 80, 800, 500, or even 600 to a dollar.
Lanre Suraj, yes. Thanks a lot for your time, and thanks for coming on the program.
Always my pleasure. Thank you so much
for
having me.
Thank you. Well, that's how much we can take on the program this week. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.